By now, I'm certain many of you know about Tyree Nichols, and for those of you who don't, here's the Twitter cliff notes. Black guy versus a bunch of cops. And when you hear that, you might think to yourself, oh, here come all these think pieces about white supremacy because a white cop showed up and did something to a black guy. Well, you're wrong, because in the landscape of Twitter, in thinking that you know everything and people want to just spew out hot takes about white supremacy, turns out the cops weren't white. They were black, and foolish on you for thinking that just because that distinction is out there, people are gonna not tie this to white supremacy.
I got a message today for some white people. If we have white people listening, paying attention, I wouldn't mind if you would do this with me. We rub our chests, we find our heartbeat, and we say, we did this. We did this. White supremacy did this. I'm talking about Tyree Nichols. The police didn't do this. The Memphis Police Department didn't do this. White supremacy did this.
Hey TikTok, this video is for my fellow white people who may be wondering what to do or say about the unaliving of Tyree Nichols. It's a really horrible thing, and the one thing we need to not do is do not share the video of his unaliving. His family has provided a video for people to share that celebrates his life. And the main focus that we need to make is that if the officers who did this had been white, they would not be facing the same consequences that they are. And that is the problem. The problem is white supremacy. The problem is policing in this country. And it is not... that doesn't cease to exist because the officers who did this were black, and it would be playing out very differently if they were not. So yeah, be conscious, look out for your black friends, and do not share the video. And if you really feel that you must watch it from a black source, not a white person who's sharing it, because that's gross. And so yeah, that's all I have to say about that.
As we get closer to the release of the Tyree Nichols footage, I just want to remind folks of three things. One, black folks, you don't have to watch. We've seen enough. Two, there's no such thing as black on black crime. It's not a thing. Three, everything that happened to Tyree is a deep expression of white supremacy. I can't express how sad this whole thing makes me and how angry. My heart goes out to his family.
Out of all the takes I saw, there's an opinion piece on CNN that's absolutely laughable. And there's two parts of this I want to hit home for, and I'm going to show them to you. Number one is, by all accounts, Nichols was a good guy, 145-pound skateboarder, an Instagram photographer, a Starbucks aficionado. Learning that your child's life was senselessly stolen from him is every black parent's nightmare. I think it would be any parent's nightmare. But surprisingly to many people, the 5 officers charged with viciously beating him were also black. How do we explain Nichols' horrific killing, allegedly at the hands of police who looked like him? From the King beating to the murder nearly 3 years ago of George Floyd, American society has often focused on the race of the officers, so often white, as a factor in their deplorable acts of violence. But the narrative, white cop kills unarmed black man, should have never been a sole lens through which we attempted to understand police abuse and misconduct. It's time to move to a more nuanced discussion of the way police violence endangers black lives. I don't know why it took about 10 years for you to start opening your mouth about that, but okay. One of the sad facts about anti-black racism is that black people ourselves are not immune to its pernicious effects. Society's message that black people are inferior, unworthy, and dangerous is pervasive. Over many decades, numerous experiments have shown that these ideas can infiltrate black minds as well as white. Self-hatred is a real thing. That's why a black store owner might regard customers of his same race with suspicion while treating his white patrons with difference. Black people can harbor anti-black sentiments and can act on those feelings in harmful ways. I could agree with that sentiment if it were not for the various examples that have been broadcast on social media of black individuals in stores doing things that could harm the people in the stores that are fellow customers and the people who work in the stores.
Tonight with an update on the weekend shooting at North Park Mall in Ridgeland. Residents across the metro still in shock after shots rang out yesterday. Ridgeland police have arrested and charged 16-year-old Zalil Deshelle Patterson for the shooting. They say she pulled a gun on a store owner, and then that owner pulled out his gun and began shooting.
I'm walking out of here, bro.
Are y'all making a deal with us? Or y'all gonna keep recording?
It's gonna be a little while.
Okay, but like. Bro, Brooke is out here! Bro, come here! Right there!
But I'm sure you could just excuse all that with their upbringing in poverty. The second thing that bothered me is what the mother said in talking about the 5 black cops that took her son's life, in saying that these 5 individuals have embarrassed the black community.
People don't know what those 5 police officers did to our family. And they really don't know what they did to their own families. They have put their own families in harm's way. They have brought shame to their own families. They brought shame to the black community.
And I could feel that sentiment. I could sit back and agree. I could have this weird mindset where I look at 5 random people who just so happen to be black and say they are representative of me as a black individual because I have no self-respect or self-confidence in myself. The reason why I'm pissed off at this is because people have seen that and they have said that along with the grieving mother. And I'm not saying she's not allowed to grieve. She lost a family member. She lost a son. She's allowed to grieve. And if you take that away from her, I think you're a little bit of a piece of shit. My issue is that this is being used as a means to say, oh, these black men, how dare they betray their own race? When I have a few examples of black people doing things to black people that, if we're going to use this same logic, should be embarrassing to the black community.
4 times in the chest. Cameron Hogg is now charged with the murder of Asia Womack. Police say he lost a game of pickup basketball earlier in the day. Then there was some trash talk, and police say he was so mad about it, he found her and then murdered her without saying a word.
Just before 2:40 in the morning on June 24th, you can see this group of teens attack this elderly man. One boy hits him in the head with a traffic cone. Then this girl hits him again. When first responders arrived, they found 73-year-old James Lambert lying on the ground.
He was breathing and his eyes were open. However, he was not speaking at that point in time.
Lambert died the next day. The medical examiner's office ruled it a homicide. We spoke with Lambert's family off camera today, and they were devastated, in disbelief that a group of kids could have done this.
Horrifying, disrespectful, and, treacherous.
Ricky Duncan is the executive director of the NOMO Foundation, a nonprofit that works to help young people avoid violence in the city. He said there's no reason teens should be out at 2 in the morning.
I'm a firm believer that hurt people is hurting people. A lot of these kids suffer from a lot of psychological discomfort, and they also suffer from, homes are not homesome. That's why I believe that the new curfew system being put in place is a must.
Police also hope the summer curfew for young people that went into effect last night will prevent attacks like this. But the officer's main message is for the parents of these children.
If they are aware that their son or daughter is involved in this incident, I think that the best course of action would be for them to contact an attorney and then contact the homicide unit and make arrangements to have themselves turned in.
I bring this up because not a lot of people have smoke to this fire. A lot of people will sit here and say, oh, you're picking and choosing, or you're doing whataboutism, you're cooning, you're trying to play to your white audience. No, I'm using what is said about this situation and carrying it to another conversation that also needs to be talked about. Because if we're going to play this game of we must care about black lives, we must understand the lens of which black people with authority use their power against black people who don't have that same gain power, you need to answer questions as it relates to black people who are not police officers, who are not leaders, who don't have leading jobs. They're just casual people who are criminals harming not just other black people, but white people as well. This weird game of pretending that black people do no wrongs, and when you finally realize that they're doing wrong to other black people, you want to say, oh, we must talk about this. Oh, we must understand that. Oh, this person really didn't mean it. Oh, this person really was a bad guy. Oh, we got to understand. Oh, poverty. Oh, this. Oh, that. You make all these excuses in this instance, but you want to claim white supremacy for these 5 dumbass black cops. And notice throughout this whole video, I have not said whether if it was justified or unjustified. That's because I didn't want you to know my thoughts until this exact moment. I think those cops should face the punishment they are currently facing at the moment because they had the power to do what they needed to do to arrest this person. They tried. He resisted arrest and they finally got him. But it was about what? 5-on-1, 6-on-1? It was more than 2 on one individual, and they used the power that they have to an excessive point. And as I've brought up in at least 2 other videos, at what point does the word excessive play a factor in this equation? Because if you have the training to subdue somebody and all the ways are not working, but you finally get them, why are you ganging up on them and beating them to the point where they are succumbing to injuries? Why are you putting somebody on the ground, pinning them on concrete and slamming their head on concrete? Why, after you're in a situation where you know somebody has a gun and you're trying to subdue them and they turn, and in that split second you have to think about yourself, your fellow workers, and people in the area, you shoot them and you get them down and you continue to light them up like a Christmas tree ornament? I could look at different instances and different examples and say justified, unjustified, excessive here, not excessive there. And when I look at this body cam footage, I'm seeing excessive behavior. I'm seeing people who have the power to subdue use that power and then abuse that power. So they're going to face the consequence of abusing that power. It's cutthroat, simple. I wish people would at least acknowledge 2 things could be right about one situation. He resisted arrest, he tried to run, and the police also abused their power once they got him. You can pick and choose which amount of body cam footage you want to use to fit your narrative. Instead, watch the whole thing. That way you can see the resisting and you could also see the abuse. It's just that easy, but I understand a lot of people don't have the time to actually do research.
I'm pretty sure at this point everybody has seen this video right there. Those are thugs. Those are not officers. It doesn't take 5 years of service, 10 years of service, 20 years of service to know that it doesn't take 5 person to handcuff a person or to give somebody. Who are you to give somebody a beating like that? Your job is not to serve justice. And if you still wear the badge this day and you don't see anything wrong with that, you go ahead and turn in your badge and leave right now. This is unacceptable. This is straight malicious, monster, thuggish act. Unacceptable. It takes common sense to know that what you're doing, something like that, or when you do something like that, is very bad for the community. And you put a lot of officers at harm because of your actions. With that being said, I'll leave you guys with this.
To end this video, I'm going to end it like this. For all the black activists, the white saviors, anybody who wants to have a stake in the game politically because you have nothing to do and all you want to say is white people are evil and their institutions infect the black minds, at what point are you going to take what you're saying about cops and acknowledge it in your own community? Because guess what? Every single person who's out robbing, looting, killing, all these criminal activities, they're not just coming from poverty. You can have people say, oh, they do it as a means to survive.
You're talking about people that will do desperate things in order to survive. And so you're not solving anything by arresting those people. You're not solving anything by shooting and killing those people.
And my generic response to that will be, why would somebody or shoot her in the basketball game is a means to survive? How are these things being used as a means to talk about how black people are doing things because they're victims of white supremacy when you have black people doing things to other black people? At what point are we going to bring all of this to the table instead of some of it to the table? I wish that this wouldn't get brought up as much, but the reason it gets brought up is because people are fighting so much for it to only be about white supremacy. They're missing the nuance that personal responsibility has to be brought up in one's own community. And I'm not talking about Tyree Nichols. I'm talking about the people who want to make this about white supremacy, to the people who say that these 5 black cops embarrass the black community. When are you going to address the embarrassment that has nothing to do with these 5 cops and that has to do with the other people in the community that do criminal activity? Because I'm genuinely sick of it. I know certain people who are victims of these people are actively sick of it. So when are we going to, as group leaders, as aficionados, as people who claim to care about black lives, suddenly disappearing and only showing up for their own cousin? When are you going to address this? Because it's up to you as the leaders, as the people who stick up for black people. Where are you? And if you're not going to show up, if you're not going to care, if you're only going to show up when you need to have something to talk about and you want to grift for some political points, understand something very important that comes from me, only me. I don't care if you view me as a conservative, liberal, all these other buzzwords, because you ain't got no sticking point. When you sit there and say Black Lives Matter and you pick and choose which ones matter, when you pick and choose which campaign you want to rally around, you don't care about black lives. You care about certain black lives. Subscribe to the channel. Fuck BLM.